Do you ever look back at a time in your life and wonder if it was real? That's how I feel when I think about the first day I met Daniel Harper. It's 1978. I'm 19, carrying a secondhand bag stuffed with textbooks, and late for my first economics lecture. The hallway smells of chalk and damp coats. It had rained all morning. I push open the heavy door, cheeks burning, and there he is, Daniel, leaning back in his chair, legs stretched out like he owns the world. He glances up, just once, and something in my chest snaps awake. I tell myself it's nothing. Just a boy with a crooked smile and eyes too blue to be trusted. But when class ends, he falls into step beside me, as if we've been walking together for years. "Margaret, right?" he asks, as though he already knows. "How?" I start, but he shrugs. "I saw the roll sheet." Cheeky, confident, dangerous. I should have walked faster. Instead, I slow down. That was the first crack in the careful life my parents wanted for me. Daniel isn't like the other boys. He listens, really listens. We spend afternoons in the campus cafe talking about books we haven't finished and futures we can't quite picture. He has this way of leaning forward when I speak, like every word matters. Sometimes he teases me, "You take life too seriously, Maggie." Other times, he looks at me so quietly, I forget how to breathe. By winter, we're inseparable. He takes me ice skating on the frozen lake, holding my mittened hands as if they're made of glass. He slips once spectacularly, and we collapse into a heap of laughter. My ribs ache from it. That night, as we walk back to the dorms, snow crunching under our boots, he stops beneath a street lamp and whispers, "I think I'm falling for you." My heart trips over itself. I'm 19. I don't know what forever means. But in that moment, I want to find out. Our love grows in quiet corners, study rooms, midnight walks, Sunday mornings when the world still sleeps. He writes me notes on torn notebook paper, silly doodles, fragments of poetry, little promises that feel like secrets. I keep every one of them in a shoebox under my bed. But love isn't just sweetness. We argue about politics, about the future, about whether dreams matter more than stability. He wants to start a business someday. I want to teach. Sometimes he storms off. Sometimes I do. Yet even in anger, we reach for each other. We refuse to let go. That's how you know it's real, isn't it? Not the perfection, but the fight to stay. Spring brings our first big test. My father discovers our relationship and disapproves. "He's too ambitious," he warns. "A man like that will always chase something beyond you." I cry in my dorm room that night, torn between duty and desire. Daniel shows up at midnight, hair damp from rain, eyes fierce. He says, "Tell me you don't love me, and I'll walk away." I can't. Of course I can't. Instead, I pull him inside and whisper, "I love you. I'm not letting anyone decide this for me." Conflict number 1, parental disapproval, burns hot for weeks. But slowly, my father softens when he sees Daniel's steady presence. Daniel wins him over not with grand gestures, but with quiet respect, helping my mother carry groceries, listening to my father's stories, showing up. That's who he is when it matters. Present. By senior year, we're planning a future. We talk about cities we might move to, apartments we can barely afford, the names of children we're not ready for. We graduate hand in hand, the shoebox of notes now heavy with 4 years of memories. The proposal comes on a warm July evening. Daniel invites me to the old campus lake where we first skated. The ice is long gone, replaced by soft ripples and fireflies. He pulls out a ring, simple, elegant, the kind you can wear every day without fear of losing a diamond. He says, "I don't promise perfection. I promise us. All the ordinary days and the extraordinary ones. Will you marry me, Maggie?" My yes comes out as a laugh, a sob, and a kiss all at once. In that moment, I believe every fairy tale I've ever read. I believe in forever. That was the beginning, the part of the story where love feels invincible, where the future stretches wide and shimmering. Of course, life had other plans, but on that day, beneath the late summer sky, I am just Margaret, newly married, heart blazing, absolutely certain that happiness is ours to keeping.
Chapter 2. 3 years of everyday magic. If falling in love with Daniel felt like stepping into a dream, then marriage with him was like learning the dream could be real. I don't mean perfect. Life is never perfect. But those first 3 years, they were a kind of quiet, golden miracle. I wake most mornings to the smell of coffee before I even open my eyes. Daniel always rises first. He says he likes the way I look half asleep, hair in a mess, lips soft with dreams. Sometimes he wakes me with a gentle kiss on the forehead. Sometimes he just sets a mug on the nightstand and whispers, "Morning, Maggie," like it's a private secret only we share. Even now, remembering that small tenderness makes my chest ache. We rent a tiny apartment downtown, no bigger than a shoebox, but to us it feels like a castle. The wallpaper is peeling, the kitchen faucet drips, but we fill it with laughter. Laughter so loud the neighbors knock on the wall and then end up laughing too. We eat dinner, sitting cross-legged on the floor when the table wobbles too much. We write silly messages on the foggy bathroom mirror. We fight over who gets the last spoonful of ice cream and then share it anyway. Daniel loves to plan surprise dates, little pockets of magic hidden inside ordinary days. One Friday night, after a long week at work, he bursts through the door with a mischievous grin. "Dress nice, Maggie. No questions." He drives me across the city to a rooftop restaurant I've never heard of. Candles flicker on every table, and fairy lights twinkle above like fallen stars. The waiter brings a bottle of cheap champagne, and Daniel toasts, "To us! To every boring Monday we make extraordinary." I nearly cry right there, because he's right. He makes even Mondays feel like celebrations. For my 22nd birthday, he outdoes himself. I come home to find the apartment dark. I push the door open, heart pounding, and suddenly the lights flare and a chorus of "Surprise!" explodes around me. Daniel has gathered every friend we have, strung balloons from the ceiling, baked a lopsided chocolate cake himself. He's wearing a ridiculous paper crown. I can barely blow out the candles for laughter. Later, when everyone leaves, We sit on the floor surrounded by empty plates, and he wraps his arms around me. "You deserve every happiness, Maggie," he whispers into my hair. I believe him. Sundays become our sacred days. We pack a small picnic, homemade sandwiches, strawberries, a thermos of coffee, and drive to the outskirts of the city. Sometimes we find a meadow and lie on our backs, watching clouds drift like lazy ships. Other times we follow a hiking trail until the noise of the world fades into birdsong and our own breathing. We talk about everything and nothing. Our hopes, our fears, the names of future dogs. He insists on Captain. I vote for Pumpkin. We agree to disagree. Evenings often end with long walks through the neighborhood, hand in hand, the street lamps glowing like gentle moons. We stop at a small bakery for warm bread, tear it apart as we walk, and share bites without thinking. Daniel hums under his breath, old songs, half-forgotten melodies, and I lean against him, memorizing the rhythm of his steps. We also dream big together. On lazy Saturday mornings, we sit by the window and sketch imaginary futures on scrap paper. Maybe we'll travel through Europe. Maybe we'll buy a little house with a garden where I can grow lavender and he can build a workshop. Maybe someday we'll open a cafe. Our ideas shift with the seasons, but the heart of every dream is the same: us. Always us. But life isn't only grand gestures. It's the soft, unnoticed moments that build a marriage. The way Daniel reaches for my hand while driving without even looking. The way he leaves sticky notes on the fridge that say, "Breathe," when he knows I'm stressed. The way he listens, really listens, when I talk about my students or my worries. Those small acts become the fabric of our days, stronger than any diamond. After 3 years of living in this bubble of laughter and late-night whispers, the conversation begins to shift. One evening, as we clear the dinner plates, Daniel leans against the counter and says, "Maggie, do you ever think about a family?" The question hangs in the warm kitchen air. My heart stutters. We've talked about someday, but not now. I wipe my hands on a dish towel and meet his eyes. He's smiling, but there's a flicker of nervous excitement there, like he's stepping onto a fragile bridge. "Of course I think about it," I admit. "All the time." He exhales in relief, pulls me close, and presses his forehead to mine. "Then maybe it's time to start planning," he whispers. Inside, I feel a spark, half joy, half fear. A baby. Our baby. Could we really be ready? We stay up late that night, sprawled on the couch, imagining tiny fingers and midnight feedings, imagining who the baby might look like, whose laugh they might inherit. I fall asleep with my head on his chest, heartbeat steady beneath my ear, and for the first time, I picture a world bigger than just the two of us. Looking back now, I can almost taste the sweetness of those years. They were the calm before a storm I couldn't yet see, the perfect fairy tale chapter that makes the tragedy sharper when it comes. But in that moment, curled against Daniel, dreaming of a child, we believe the universe is smiling on us. We believe love will be enough.
Chapter 3: The Road to New Life. People like to say that when you decide to start a family, it just happens. They never tell you about the months of waiting, the silent questions, the small heartbreaks. After that night of whispered dreams, Daniel and I throw ourselves into the idea of becoming parents. At first, it feels exciting, almost playful. We circle dates on the calendar, laugh at how clinical it all seems. But month after month, the test sticks stay stubbornly blank. Each negative feels like a tiny door closing. I try not to let it show, but inside I start keeping a quiet tally. 1 month, 2, 5, 7, each one heavier than the last. Friends announce pregnancies on calls, their glowing smiles like tiny stings. At baby showers, I smile until my cheeks ache, then cry in the car afterward. Daniel notices, of course. He always notices. One evening, when I'm sitting at the kitchen table staring at another negative test, he kneels beside me and takes my hands. "Maggie, this isn't your fault. It isn't anyone's fault. We'll keep trying, or we'll find another way. I love you, not some plan on a calendar." His words should comfort me, and they do, but a part of me aches anyway. It's strange how you can feel loved and still feel inadequate at the same time. We see doctors, we read articles, we adjust our diet. I drink herbal teas that taste like old socks. Daniel buys vitamins, rearranges our schedules, even learns how to cook quinoa. He never complains, never blames. He just keeps holding my hand through every appointment, every awkward question. Month 8 arrives with no expectations. We've learned to guard our hearts. Then one ordinary morning, I see the faintest pink line on a test strip. I blink. I shake it. It stays. My breath catches. "Daniel!" I shout, voice breaking. He comes running, half asleep, hair sticking up in every direction. I hold up the test with trembling fingers. His eyes widen. For a heartbeat, neither of us speaks. Then he lets out a sound, half laugh, half sob, and sweeps me into his arms. We stand in the tiny bathroom, wrapped around each other, laughing and crying all at once. After 8 months of waiting, our miracle has finally arrived. Pregnancy transforms Daniel in ways I never expect. He's always been thoughtful, but now he becomes a force of pure devotion. He insists on doing the grocery shopping so I won't have to carry heavy bags. He learns every food craving before I do. When I mention I'm hungry for strawberries at midnight, he drives across town to find them, coming back triumphant with a basket like he's retrieved a treasure. He reads every baby book he can find, highlighting sections, making lists. He starts leaving notes around the apartment. "Drink water. Rest when you can. You are beautiful." When morning sickness hits, he sits beside me on the bathroom floor, rubbing my back and whispering silly jokes to make me smile. When my feet swell, he massages them with warm oil, patient as a saint. He talks to the baby every night, pressing his lips to my belly and saying, "Hello, little one. It's your dad. We can't wait to meet you." At doctor visits, he asks more questions than I do. He memorizes every heartbeat on the ultrasound, every tiny measurement. He learns how to time contractions, even though we're months away from needing it. Sometimes, late at night, I catch him just watching me with a look I can't quite name. "What?" I ask, half amused. He shakes his head, eyes shining. "I just can't believe you're carrying our child. You're incredible, Maggie." Those moments fill me with a warmth so deep it almost hurts. Love can be overwhelming like that. The months pass in a blur of doctor visits and nursery preparations. We paint the tiny room a soft seafoam green, arguing playfully over crib placement. Daniel builds a rocking chair with his own hands, sanding the wood late into the night. He says, I want you to have the perfect spot to hold the baby, showing me the smooth armrests with boyish pride. My body changes daily, stretching, aching, glowing. Daniel treats every change like a miracle. When I complain about my swollen ankles, he laughs and massages them. When I groan about my whitening hips, he calls me radiant until I blush. Friends tell me I'm lucky. They don't know the half of it. Then one humid August evening, it begins. I'm folding tiny onsies in the nursery when a sharp pain cuts through my lower back. I freeze, hand gripping the edge of the crib. Another pain follows, stronger this time. A slow realization spreads through me, equal parts fear and excitement. "Daniel!" I call, voice trembling. He appears in the doorway, eyes instantly alert. I manage to say, "It's time." For a heartbeat, he stands perfectly still, then springs into action, grabbing the hospital bag, helping me to the car, murmuring steady reassurances. As we drive through the quiet streets, the world outside feels distant, unreal. All I can hear is the thunder of my own heartbeat and Daniel's calm voice. "Breathe, Maggie. I'm right here. We're about to meet our baby." Labor pains roll through me like waves, sharp and relentless. But beneath the fear is a current of wonder. After months of waiting, of aching hope, our child is finally ready to enter the world. I grip Daniel's hand, and he squeezes back, strong, steady, unshakable. Whatever comes next, we are in it together.
Chapter 4. The Day the World Tilted. Labor is not a polite thing. It is wild and ancient, a storm that takes your body and makes it something more than human. The first contractions had come like whispers, sharp but manageable. Now, hours later, they roar through me in relentless waves. My back arches, my breath shortens, sweat beads on my forehead despite the cool hospital room. Daniel is beside me, gripping my hand so tightly I can feel the bones pressed together. "You've got this, Maggie," he whispers, his voice steady even as his eyes flicker with worry. I want to answer, but another contraction seizes me, stealing my words. The nurses move around us in a blur of calm efficiency. One checks the monitor, another adjusts my IV. I focus on the rhythmic beep of the baby's heartbeat, a fragile melody in the chaos. Hours stretch like elastic. 10 minutes feels like 10 years. There are moments when I think I can't go on. My body feels split in two, my breath ragged. Daniel leans close, brushing damp hair from my forehead. "Look at me," he says softly. "We're almost there. Just us, remember?" I cling to his voice, to the warmth of his hand, to the promise of the life we are about to meet. After what feels like an eternity, 12 hours maybe, the doctor announces it's time to push. Everything narrows to a single primal focus. Push, breathe, push again. Pain surges through me, fierce and consuming, but beneath it burns something stronger. Determination. I am terrified, but I am ready. One final push. A cry splits the air. A sharp, glorious sound that cuts through the haze like sunlight. "It's a boy!" the doctor exclaims. My heart explodes with relief and wonder. Tears flood my eyes as the nurse places a small, wriggling bundle on my chest. My son. Our son. Daniel leans in, eyes wide and wet. He's perfect," he whispers. I look down and gasp. He is perfect.
a tiny, miraculous copy of his father. The same strong chin, the same stubborn cowlick in his dark hair, even the same faint dimple in his left cheek. When he cries, I cry with him. Our tears mix in the soft folds of the hospital blanket. But as the haze of euphoria begins to lift, something catches my attention. There, on the side of his tiny head, dark bruises bloom like storm clouds. Another on his ear, a faint shadow under his left eye. At first, I think it's the dim light, a trick of shadow. But when the nurse adjusts the blanket, the bruises remain. My heart freezes. Daniel, I whisper, voice trembling. He sees it too. The color drains from his face. Why does he look like that? He asks, barely audible. The nurse notices our alarm and reassures us quickly. It could be birth trauma. Sometimes babies bruise during delivery. But her eyes linger a second too long on the marks, and unease coils tighter in my chest. Before I'm even discharged, Daniel and I insist on calling the pediatrician. Dr. Harris, a kindly child specialist with silver hair and gentle eyes, examines our son carefully. He prods, peers, frowns. Then he straightens, his expression carefully neutral. I want you to see a hematologist, he says quietly. The words drop into the room like stones. A hematologist? Daniel repeats, voice sharp with fear. What's wrong? It's probably nothing, Dr. Harris says, but his careful tone betrays him. It's just precautionary. My chest tightens as if a fist has closed around it. Precautionary or not, something is wrong. 2 hours later, we're in the pediatric hematology unit, our newborn cradled against my chest. The air smells of antiseptic and worry. Dr. Evelyn Marks greets us with a firm handshake and kind eyes that do little to ease my terror. She examines our baby, James, we finally agreed to call him, and orders a series of tests. First, we'll run a complete blood count. That will tell us if he has enough red and white cells and platelets. The nurses draw tiny vials of blood from James's impossibly small veins. He whimpers, and I press my lips to his head, whispering apologies into his soft hair. Hours later, Dr. Marks returns with the first results. The CBC is normal, she says with a gentle smile. Relief rushes through me so quickly I almost collapse. But before I can exhale, she continues. Next, we need to check his clotting ability. We'll run a prothrombin time, PT, and an activated partial thromboplastin time, APTT. Daniel squeezes my shoulder. Routine, right? Dr. Marks gives a small nod. Routine, but her eyes flicker with something I can't name. We wait. And wait. The hospital clock ticks in cruel, deliberate beats. I feed James, rock him, count the freckles on Daniel's hand as it rests over mine. Finally, hours later, Dr. Marks calls us into a small consultation room. My stomach knots before she even speaks. The APTT is abnormal, she begins gently. It means James's blood takes longer to clot than normal. We need to run further tests to confirm what's causing it. Her words swirl around me, muffled and heavy. Abnormal. Further tests. I nod mechanically, but inside my mind races through every worst-case scenario I've ever heard. Days pass in a blur of needles, lab coats, and sleepless nights. We shuttle between home and hospital, each new test a fresh spike of fear. Daniel tries to stay strong, but I catch him sometimes staring at the floor with his jaw tight, eyes distant.
Then, one overcast afternoon, Dr. Marks delivers the verdict. James has hemophilia A, she says softly. It's a rare genetic bleeding disorder. His blood lacks the clotting factor 8, which means even minor injuries can cause dangerous bleeding. The ground vanishes beneath me. My ears ring, the room tilts. I clutch James tighter, as if my embrace alone can keep him safe. Daniel sits rigid beside me, eyes glassy. He clears his throat, voice rough. What do we do now? Dr. Marks explains treatments. Factor replacement therapy, precautions, emergency protocols. But her words blur together like static. All I can hear is the echo of rare, bleeding, dangerous. Afterwards, Daniel pulls me into his arms. His voice is hoarse but firm. We'll handle this, Maggie, he vows. Whatever it takes. We'll give him the best life possible. I nod against his chest, clinging to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I want to believe him. I need to believe him.
Chapter 5. The Cracks in the Armor. At first, Daniel's focus steadies me. When I wake at 2 a.m. to check James's breathing, Daniel is already awake, scrolling through medical journals, muttering about factor replacement therapy. We are a team, standing shoulder to shoulder against a world suddenly filled with invisible threats. But as the weeks pass, the weight begins to press harder. Factor infusions become our new normal. Tiny vials arrive by courier, each one a reminder that our son's life depends on a fragile supply chain. I learn to hold James's arm just so while the nurse inserts the needle. I sing softly to drown out the beep of the infusion pump. Sometimes he cries, sometimes he just stares at me with wide, trusting eyes, and that hurts even more. The hospital bills arrive like unwelcome guests. Numbers with too many zeros march across crisp white paper. Even with insurance, the copays and deductibles stack higher than our savings. I start clipping coupons, skipping haircuts, selling the little gold earrings Daniel gave me on our first anniversary. I tell myself it's only money, but each sacrifice feels like another small theft from the life we once imagined. Daniel notices. He begins to tap his fingers against the kitchen table when the mail arrives, a restless rhythm I can't ignore. One night, after we put James to bed, he says, "Margaret, we need to talk about sustainability." The word tastes clinical, out of place in our marriage. I know he means money, but I also hear the question buried inside. Can we sustain this life? I say, we'll manage. We have to. He doesn't argue, but his eyes linger on the unopened bills stacked on the counter. Weeks bleed into months. James grows, his giggles as bright as morning light, but every bruise feels like a personal failure. A tumble on the carpet leaves a deep purple mark. A bump from a toy car requires an urgent call to the hematologist. I keep a running tally of incidents in a small notebook, my handwriting shaky from exhaustion. Daniel begins to stay later at work. At first, he claims it's overtime for extra pay. Then it becomes traffic. Then a meeting ran long. When he does come home, he's quieter, his shoulders heavy, his gaze sliding past me to the television. One evening, I find him sitting in the dark living room long after James is asleep. The glow from the streetlight outside cuts sharp lines across his face. He doesn't look up when I enter. "Dan?" I whisper. He exhales a long, slow breath. "I didn't sign up for this," he says finally. The words drop like stones into the silence. For a heartbeat I don't understand, Then I do. This? I repeat, my voice barely a thread. This constant fear, the hospital runs, the bills, the limits. His hands tighten into fists. I love him, Margaret. You know I do. But I wanted a family where we could live, not just manage a disease. Something inside me cracks. I want to shout that we are living, that James is worth every sacrifice, but the word's not in my throat. Instead, I sit beside him, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and terror. We're his parents, I say quietly. There is no signing up. He's ours. We fight for him. That's it. He doesn't answer. The silence between us stretches wide and cold. From that night on, an invisible wall grows. He still shows up for doctor visits, still kisses James goodnight, but his smiles feel thinner, his hugs shorter. I catch him staring out the window as if searching for an escape. The first time he misses an infusion appointment, he claims he forgot. The second time, he blames traffic. By the third, he doesn't bother with excuses. I keep going. I learned to drive the infusion needles myself. I memorized emergency phone numbers. I pack bleed bags for every outing, bandages, ice packs, a printed list of James's medications. Each small act becomes both shield and sword, a way to protect my child and defy the growing distance in our home. But late at night, when James sleeps and the house is silent, I press my palm to the empty side of the bed and feel the slow erosion of something I once believed unshakable. Love, I'm learning, doesn't always leave with a door slam. Sometimes it fades in increments, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Because storms rarely stop at one wave, they come in sets, each one higher than the last.
Chapter 6. Alone in the Storm. Revisited. He left in an ordinary way that felt like the loudest thing I'd ever heard. One morning, the kettle whistled, sunlight poured across the kitchen table, and Daniel kissed James on the forehead, as he usually did. He hugged me like he was steadying himself, like he was trying to remember how being close used to feel. He whispered, "I wanted a perfect family, Maggie. I thought I could do it. I can't." And then he walked out the door. No shouting, no suitcases flung down, just a man stepping out of a life as if it were a stage set he no longer wanted to inhabit. The front door's click echoed in the rooms for weeks after. I sat on the floor holding James, his small cheek against my collarbone, his breath warm and irregular. I remember the exact sound of his tiny inhale. "It's just you and me," I told him, voice raw. "Just us." Fear landed like a stone in my belly, heavy and cold, but under it, something fierce uncoiled. We would survive. We had to. The bills didn't take that as a suggestion. Hospital invoices arrived with surgical neatness, dates, codes, totals, factor vials, infusion equipment, specialist consults, each item a small, legal-looking edict that demanded payment. I learned to read those statements the way other mothers learn lullabies. Each new line of numbers taught me a new kind of dread. Work became the place where my hands hurt for reasons other than love. I took a morning shift at a pharmacy, stacking boxes, then an evening shift as a caregiver in a neighbor's home. I sorted pills for other people, washed dishes in late-night diners, answered the phone for an agency that paid in small, punctual checks. Each paycheck I tucked into the same account, James's account, and every withdrawal felt like taking a bit of my own skin. Grocery runs turned into arithmetic. Coupons, sale flyers, store brand cereal. I learned to stretch broth into soup for 2 meals. Once, when there wasn't enough, I ate the sandwich crusts so his plate looked full. I sold things, small things. An old locket my mother gave me, the gold earrings Daniel bought me on our first anniversary. They weren't much, but the clinic clerk smiled apologetically and handed me the new statement anyway. School was another battlefield. James was a child who loved movement. He loved to swing and climb and run in that particular way children do, because the world needs their courage. One afternoon, I got the call. "Mrs. Harper, he fell at recess. We've called an ambulance." The nurse's voice quivered on the line, and I dropped a mug in the sink, porcelain in a spiderweb. At the ER, the bruise on his thigh had darkened as if night had painted itself under his skin. They ran the tests, and in the hum of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell, I felt everything I'd built buckle for a moment. An infusion, then observation, then a discharge with instructions stacked like bricks. Keep him calm, watch for swelling, come back if anything changes. I sat on the plastic chair and fed him juice through a straw while the nurse patched him up. He looked at me, small and brave, and said, "It's okay, Mama. I'm not scared." He wasn't. I was. I had learned to translate fear into action. The next day, I called every teacher, every coach, every school aide. I requested padded playtimes. I walked the playground with a list, making sure adults knew where he'd be and what to do. And then came the letter. I remember where I was, the kitchen table, the bill-strewn island, James asleep on the couch after his afternoon nap. The envelope wasn't thick. It looked like any other corporate note. I slid it open with the dull edge of a butter knife because my hands were shaking. "Dear Mrs. Harper, we regret to inform you that policy number 45-9832 for James Daniel Harper has lapsed due to an administrative renewal failure. Coverage terminated effective June 30th. Claims processed after that date are not covered. To date, the total value of factor replacement therapy and related inpatient services provided amounts to $18,000. Kindly remit the outstanding balance within 90 days. Failure to settle the outstanding balance will result in immediate referral to our legal collections department and potential civil action. If you believe this notice has been issued in error, please contact our billing department within 14 days. I read it twice, 3 times until the letters swam. $18,000? 90 days? Face the law? The sentences were polite and small, and they carried a guillotine inside them. I called the number at the bottom and sat on hold until my jaw ached. A woman with a corporate voice told me there had been a renewal lapse and apologies for any inconvenience. The words were practiced, the tone unrevealing. When I asked who was responsible, she told me to file an appeal. When I asked why they hadn't notified me, she asked me to verify my contact information. When I told them I'd paid every premium on time, the line went quiet for a second, and then came the phrase, "Our records do not show responsibility on our end." Something hot and furious rose up in me, anger sharpened by exhaustion and the barest instinct to protect my child. I grabbed James's medical file, the paid receipts, photocopies of deposit slips, emails confirming payments. I put everything into a folder and sat on the floor until the kitchen light burned low. They were asking me to be criminally ill-prepared for the care of my child. They were asking me to sign away his safety. They were asking me to choose between his medicines and the roof over our heads.
I pressed my forehead to the folder and let myself cry. Short, ugly sobs that felt like tearing out a part of myself. Then I breathed. I dried my face with the back of my hand and called the hematology clinic. Dr. Marks answered, her voice steady. "Bring everything and come see me tomorrow. We'll write what we have to write." So that's what I did. I packed the receipts, the hospital records, the tiny tubes of blood results. I walked into that clinic feeling smaller than I had ever felt and somehow more furious than I had ever been. The word scam floated in my thoughts. The idea that someone would weaponize paperwork against a child's life made bile rise in my throat. The letter sat on the counter that night like a countdown clock. 90 days. Pay $18,000 or face the law. I slept with my arm over James, listening to the rise and fall of his breathing, and told myself out loud, "We will find a way. We will find a way, because there is no other choice." Rehook. The cliff had arrived, not with thunder, but with ink, and a demand. The next moves would be quieter and meaner than any I'd fought before. The hearings were coming, the reckoning too.
The day I walked into the courthouse, I felt like a soldier marching into a battlefield, except my armor was a folder full of receipts, letters, and medical reports. The room smelled faintly of varnish and anxiety. The judge's bench loomed high, and I gripped James' medical file as if it were a lifeline, which in truth it was. Dr. Evelyn Marks, my steadfast hematologist, was by my side. Her calm presence had carried me through sleepless nights and hospital corridors. Now, in the courtroom, she became our champion. She spoke with the kind of authority that silences roomfuls of doubt. The patient, James Harper, is a child diagnosed with hemophilia A. Without factor replacement therapy, any minor injury can escalate into a life-threatening bleed. Every infusion, every vial, every medical intervention is not elective. It is survival. I watched the jury take notes, their faces attentive. Dr. Marks laid out the medical records with precision, explaining the treatments, the necessity, and the costs involved. She illustrated how the insurance company's failure to maintain coverage put a child's life at risk, and described in clear terms the sequence of negligence that had forced a single mother to bear $18,000 in medical expenses. The lawyers representing the insurance company tried every tactic: technicalities, procedural loopholes, insinuations of missed payments. But Dr. Marks remained unflappable. When one of them suggested the infusions were not urgent, she brought up the documented bruises, the emergency calls, the hospital notes, all meticulously recorded in my own handwriting. I remember the hush that fell when she leaned forward, her tone steady but firm. That these treatments had not been administered, the child would have faced serious medical complications, potentially fatal. There is no gray area. This is a matter of life and death. I glanced at James, now 6, his small face bright in memory, his trust absolute. I imagined holding him through those nights again, the fear, the pain, the cries that kept us awake. My throat tightened. This wasn't just paperwork. This was his life. Hours passed. Testimony, cross-examination, legal jargon that made my head spin. I sat quietly, speaking only when asked. I didn't need to argue. The truth was my voice. Finally,
The judge leaned forward, scanning the evidence, and delivered the verdict. The court rules in favor of Margaret Harper. The insurance company is ordered to cover all medical expenses incurred, including factor replacement therapy, and to ensure that the policy remains in effect for the foreseeable future. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for months. Relief surged through me, but it was tinged with exhaustion. I felt Dr. Mark squeeze my hand, her quiet acknowledgement of a battle fought together and won. We left the courthouse later that day, the folder still under my arm, my steps lighter than they had been in months. Outside, the sun shone as if celebrating the small victory of one mother over an unfeeling system. James's safety, his life, was secured, not just by law, but by the steadfast care of those who refuse to let bureaucracy decide a child's fate. Years passed. Time has a way of softening fear, but never erasing memory. James grew, brilliant, determined, full of life. His laughter filled our small home in ways I never imagined possible. School became a place of triumph, a sanctuary rather than a source of anxiety. And then medicine called to him, the same calling that had once saved him, guiding him into knowledge that could save others. He excelled beyond what even I dared to hope for. Scholarships, awards, the respect of teachers and peers alike. Each milestone felt like a quiet nod from the universe, telling me we had endured for a reason. The house was quiet that afternoon. I had prepared a small meal, expecting James to come home for the weekend, just as he did every time the semester allowed. The aroma of roasted chicken and garlic bread lingered in the air. The doorbell rang. My heart leapt. I ran toward the door, imagining James's face, his backpack slung over one shoulder, the weekend's laughter waiting in his eyes. I flung it open, and there he stood. Daniel.
The doorbell had rung, and my heart leapt, imagining James back for the weekend. I ran to the door, expecting his familiar grin, the backpack casually slung over one shoulder. Instead, Daniel stood there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked smaller, somehow, though his presence still filled the doorway. I had not seen him in almost 18 years. His once dark hair was streaked with gray. Lines creased his face like dried riverbeds. And yet those same blue eyes, the ones that once promised forever, still held that disarming warmth. "Margaret," he said, voice rough but careful. "May I come in?" My muscles wanted to protest. Every part of me screamed no. But something, curiosity, memory, maybe a flicker of old affection, made me step aside. James, standing a few steps behind me, tilted his head curiously. His eyes darted between us, sensing the tension before understanding it. "Dad?" he asked, quietly. Daniel's gaze softened immediately when it fell on James. I didn't expect to see you like this," he muttered. James didn't move. He just studied him, this man he had never truly known but who carried the same features, the same hesitant smile that made him, James, look like him. We settled into the kitchen for dinner. The casserole, warm and fragrant, sat untouched between us. The air hummed with unease. Daniel fidgeted with his napkin, eyes darted from me to James. He said, I heard about James's achievements. Pre-med, right? Hematology?" James nodded slowly, his hands wrapped around his glass. "Yes,
I want to help kids like me." His tone was polite, but measured, testing the waters. Daniel's eyes softened with something like pride. "That's incredible. You've done an incredible job." The words landed like small stones in my chest, heavy, almost painful. For years, I had dreamed of him acknowledging the years of sleepless nights, the bills I had conquered, the fear I had turned into strength. Now that it was here, it felt bittersweet. Too late, yet strangely comforting. James remained silent for a moment, then added, "We managed. Mom did most of it." His voice carried quiet pride. I squeezed his hand under the table. Daniel cleared his throat. "Margaret, I'm sick. Early onset dementia. The doctors say it's progressing faster than they expected. I don't have anyone else." The words hung raw and jagged between us. I should feel anger, unfiltered, righteous. He had left when our son needed him most. He had abandoned us. But instead, there was a slow, aching sympathy that crawled up my chest. It didn't erase the hurt, but it reminded me that life's currents are unpredictable, relentless. James studied him, his young eyes weighing justice against mercy. "So, you're staying here?" he asked, cautiously, not entirely pleased, but curious about the implications. I nodded stiffly. "Yes, for now, until the care arrangements are sorted." "But Dad," I said, my voice steady, "you're not in charge here. You follow the rules." Daniel's gaze fell, humbled in a way I hadn't seen since the day he left. The man who had once walked away from responsibility now faced a reckoning of dependency, a role reversal he had never anticipated. The dinner continued in quiet tension. Words stumbled, laughter was forced, and silences stretched long. James occasionally glanced at me, seeking reassurance, which I gave with a subtle nod. I could feel the weight of the past pressing on all of us, Daniel, James, and me, but also a fragile possibility of something resembling equilibrium. And yet, even as we ate, the unspoken truth lingered. The past could not be erased, only acknowledged, navigated, and survived.
Chapter 9. Life's Full Circle. The days that followed Daniel's return were complicated. At first, it felt almost impossible. The man who had left us in our darkest hour was now living under my roof. But he was not the same man I had once known. The dementia had crept in quietly, erasing pieces of memory, making him fragile and dependent in ways that my heart ached. James, now in his 3rd year of medical school, observed everything with the maturity that sometimes startled me. "Mom," he said one evening, "he needs help, and I want to help him too." I nodded, silently grateful for the man my son had become. A young doctor in training who understood compassion, responsibility, and the weight of choices. He had seen my struggles, my sleepless nights, my fight against an uncaring world, and he had absorbed it all. Caring for Daniel was no small task. I arranged 24/7 nursing support, medication schedules, and safety checks. Each morning, I watched him slowly awaken, sometimes confused, sometimes lucid, always needing guidance. I reminded myself that this was part of life's cycle,
that the hands that once abandoned now needed support. James would come home whenever he could, and together we navigated mealtimes, medical appointments, and quiet evenings. I noticed how he instinctively included Daniel in our routines, patient and gentle, never judgmental. Watching him care for his father, I saw the culmination of all the lessons I had tried to teach him: resilience, compassion, and the courage to face challenges head on. Through it all, I never remarried. I had learned that love could be both joy and burden, and that my greatest duty was to protect the life I nurtured, to raise James into a man of character. I realized that family is not defined by presence alone, but by care, effort, and unwavering loyalty. Time passed, and the house settled into a rhythm. Daniel's illness progressed, and James continued to excel in school. The home, once filled with fear and uncertainty, now carried quiet determination and warmth. I understood that life does not always return what we expect, but it offers moments of grace to those who persist. And in the quiet of the evening, when the lights are dim and the house is still, I often reflect on the journey, the betrayals, the struggles, the victories. They shaped me into the person I am today. Every sleepless night, every infusion, every bill paid, every fight won, it all mattered. I learned that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the small acts, making sure a child's medicine is administered, preparing a meal for a father who once abandoned you, cheering for a son who surpasses even your highest hopes. Moral of the story: life is rarely perfect, and love is never without trials. True courage is not measured by the absence of hardship, but how we rise, protect, and nurture those we love in the face of betrayal and adversity. Family is defined not by perfection, but by resilience, compassion, and unwavering commitment. And sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most profound growth, not just in our children, but in ourselves.